Good evening and welcome all to this annual A.N. Smith Memorial Lecture, which over the years has become the premier public lecture in Australia on journalism and issues confronting the media. And nowadays those issues are formidable and challenging. We meet today on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present. My name is Michael Gawenda and I am the Director of the Centre for Advanced Journalism. The centre opened this year and its mission is to improve the practice of journalism. It's a big challenge. The centre has a number of research projects underway, including a nearly completed piece of research on the way the media covered the Victorian bushfires. We have other research projects underway. We have started our public lecture program, which started with the former Prime Minister John Howard. We will have more public lectures over the next 12 months. The centre is situated within the Faculty of Arts and works closely with the Media and Communications program in the School of Culture and Communications. This program offers a distinctive blend of academic study and media-related practice delivered by internationally recognised scholars and experienced industry professionals. It is a great school. Now, Arthur Norman Smith was an outstanding Australian journalist, best known for his political reporting. With the opening of the first Commonwealth Parliament in Melbourne, after Federation in 1901, he became a foundation member of the Federal Press Gallery and reported every sitting of Parliament for the next 27 years before the Parliament moved to Canberra. This is a great achievement, unlikely to be bettered. Mr. Smith helped found the Australian Journalists Association in 1910, which of course has morphed into the bigger union, the MEAA, and he served as both the AJA's President and General Secretary. After his death in 1935, his family asked the University of Melbourne's Council for approval to endow an annual lecture in his name. The first lecture was given the following year by Sir Edward Cunningham, who was an old editor of the Argus. They used to knight editors back then. Over the subsequent 70-plus years, lecturers have included Rupert Murdoch, Mary Delahunty, Michelle Grattan, John Fain, Paul Kelly, Kim Beazley and Maxine McHugh. I had the honour of delivering the lecture last year. I want to thank the Smith family on behalf of the University for their continuing support of this very important lecture. Now to tonight's lecturer. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Mark Scott. That was not a Freudian slip. The Managing Director and Editor-in-Chief of the ABC.
Well, look, thank you, Michael, for the kind welcome, and I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted to be here with a number of other people who have delivered the A.N. Smith Memorial Lecture. Michael himself, John Fain, Paul Chadwick, Eric Beecher. Rupert Murdoch's not here tonight, and perhaps I think it's even fair to say he's not even here in spirit tonight. But Rupert is never far from our thoughts, as we will see. It took Edward Gibbon nearly 20 years and 6 volumes to map the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. W.H. Auden, in his evocative poem The Fall of Rome, condensed the experience to just 28 lines. Tonight, as I discuss the tremors of change and the shifting ground beneath our media empires, you'll be glad to hear that I've taken Auden as my text, although I cannot quite model his economy. And by the end, you might think I've been more like Gibbon. But Auden's poem is wonderful. Fragments, voices, images, a mosaic of decline. Greatness disappearing piece by piece as a new world emerges. And the poem makes the point, of course, that there's no one reason why empires fail. Why those forces that seem to generate such success, such wealth, such dominance seem to lose their potency and impact. Why the points on the compass suddenly shift, and that which once made us great becomes instead the source of our demise. Auden brilliantly depicts the forces of change gathering in the distance. Altogether elsewhere vast, herds of reindeer move across miles and miles of golden moss, silently and very fast. Tonight I want to talk about media empires. They have been giants in our lives. And in these early days of a new millennium, shockwaves are being felt all around them. They now seem less like agents of their destinies than helpless witnesses to the unravelling of what they all once stood for. These have turned out to be desperate days. Some will fail, others will renew and endure. So let's look at some of these things within empires that have changed. Let's look at the stresses the new forces are bringing. Let's look at the behaviours of the media Caesars under this pressure. And let's think about what might happen now. We have reached a point we should perhaps have seen coming, yet largely we did not. And nothing has prepared us for it. Many who were once visionary media leaders failed at the time of their great success to see the reality of the business, the inherent weakness, to see how real the risks were, the emerging threats. Today they seem largely out of solutions and instead challenge reality by seeking to deny a revolution that's already taking place, by attempting to use a power that no longer exists, by trying to impose on the world a law that is impossible to enforce. We will surely look back on the 19th and 20th century and say that media was a great business to be in. Audiences hungry for news and entertainment. Powerful media organisations with deep pockets fighting hard to keep competitors out and profits in. A steady rationalisation, and with competitors being either swallowed up or steamrolled, those who survived never had it so good. The names are legendary. The Hearsts and the Grahams in the States, Beaverbrook and Rothermere in Britain, the Murdochs and Packers here. Even the fictional names were legendary. Citizen Kane. For staff working in media organisations, the proprietors were often people they learned to hate. Always wealthy, often remote and cavalier, occasionally cruel, brutal and hard-hearted. They had money, yes, but they also had the power of belief. They believed in the product, its importance, its influence. They were competitive and they'd back themselves in a fight, spend money now to make money later. They were after a reward beyond money. They wanted the influence and the power that came with the ownership of a media empire. So when people remember the barons, they remember them with a respect for the passion and love they had for the product. Murdoch arriving in a newsroom with a bundle of papers under his arms, sleeves rolled up, critiquing edition after edition in front of a tremulous editor. Packer barking down the phone to some programmer about last night's numbers. The Fairfaxes letting the editors spend what it took so they could cover the stories as they needed. There are fewer barons now, fewer individuals who can make bold and at times financially irrational calls to spend, to expand, to grow, to wait, to be patient. Now the metrics are simpler. Shareholder value, ROI, and most owners are not barons. They are funds, they are investors, they are banks, and they are rational in terms of the returns they require. It's just a business like any other business. It could just as easily be a shoe store or a grocery. For the barons, it was more than a business, it was a life and a passion, and many would try and protect most that which they loved. And today, when that protection is most needed, most of the barons have gone. The Packers have largely sold out of traditional media. The Bancrofts took the cash. The Salzburgers lost most of theirs. The Fairfaxes own less than 10%. Tony Riley's in trouble. Conrad Black is in jail. And Rupert? Well, Rupert is in a category all of his own. We'd better come back to Rupert later on. There is an argument that this old proprietorial model, long run by media barons, operated as a form of protection from harsh realities the businesses may have otherwise faced. They were still vastly profitable. Some Australian newspapers and television networks ran on margins that were the envy of the rest of the world. But the key business success, particularly in open markets, is not about how much money you're making today or have made in the past. It is about how much money you will make. What is your growth story? Well, a growth story now for traditional media, that's getting harder and harder to find. But when you look back on it, some fundamental weaknesses in the traditional publishing and broadcasting model were evident long before the internet revolution. The barons worked on a variation of the J. Paul Getty formula for success. Rise early, work hard, strike oil. TV, radio and newspapers were their oil. But only the most naive or indifferent to reality could have failed to see the ominous signs a long time ago, in the days when Google was an inconceivable number, when Yahoo signalled uncouthness, when twittering was something teachers told their children to stop. The free-to-air television networks used their muscle to keep further licences restrained, manipulating the market, prevailing over politicians, keeping competitors out. Which is why a quarter of a century's speculation about a fourth commercial television licence came to exactly nothing. And who'd want it now? Media policy amounted to not much more than a tawdry cast of compromises designed to appease these moguls. The restraining power of free-to-air television moguls explains to the glacial embrace of pay television in Australia, finally arriving here 20 years after the United States. Even without the internet, it was inevitable that one day commercial television would face significant competition for audiences and advertisers, that the oligopoly would break down, taking audiences and therefore advertisers and therefore revenues away, taking away the growth story that had maintained and sustained the corporations. There used to be far more newspapers in print. They closed, they merged, they disappeared. Television killed the afternoon newspapers. The weekend newspapers killed the quality weeklies and the news magazines. I've heard it said that no editor of any of these publications that closed thought, as the end neared, that there was anything wrong with the product. But the long-run trend showed fewer people wanted to read a paper every day. Young people read less than older people. And no matter what magic a particular editor might possess, reverses to circulation decline were sporadic and ephemeral, and more often purchased with massive discounting, ghost readers and giveaways. On the reverse side, at the broadsheets, the classifieds funded the newsrooms. And again, even before online, the signs were there of efforts to loosen the iron grip metropolitan papers had on bringing together buyers and sellers. Suburban newspapers ate a chunk of real estate revenue. Their much more attractive glossy colour newsprint had it all over the dull lineage ads. And there was also evidence that some people only wanted the classifieds and weren't interested in the rest of the paper, giving rise to publications like the Trading Post that took away profits for a time until now, when the Times will take it also away. The response was for bigger newspapers, more inserts, more magazines, to grow opportunities for display advertisers. But sometimes these seem to be more for the advertisers' interests than the readers. These pressures were evident when only a handful of people could print or broadcast to reach an audience of scale. But now anyone can instantly publish on the web. And as long as they have content that people want to see and read, they can reach millions. The extent of the revolution could not have been seen, the extent of the transformation, the way it shifted power to audiences, the power to choose what they would see and read, from where and when. In strategy, technology companies continually outclassed the content companies. They were always ahead of the game. And you can see now how few of these media companies were nimble enough or quick enough in response, how they struggled to try and work out just what was going on here. I suspect that the law about technological change, that the impact of most change is overestimated in the short term and underestimated in the long term, may prove to have never been more true than in the case of the internet revolution. It's interesting to observe the differing reactions of various media empires to the emerging online world. Some companies found growth in diversification from the sector. As the New York Times was investing more in newsprint, notably by buying the Boston Globe and taking control of the International Herald Tribune, the Washington Post company took another tack. It sought leverage out of its earlier purchase of Kaplan, an educational testing company. Kaplan now sustains the Post and represents more than half the earnings of the Washington Post company. The iconic masthead itself lost more than $130 million in the last half year. But the growth of the company has been sustained by Kaplan, and now the Washington Post company has a market capitalisation 4 times that of the New York Times company. In the midst of the storm, it's easy to take pot shots at failed strategies of the past. The Times' purchase of the Globe being $1 billion bungle. Fairfax's failure to buy Seek, not that it was ever really on offer. The exuberant overspend of dot-coms before the late 90s bust and the underspending after the bust. The inability to find any major traditional media organisation that you could confidently say has got it right in this world of fragmenting content and audiences. And it would be wonderful tonight to be able to come here and to present you with some blinding insight that everyone else has missed. A pathway through to a more vibrant future for old media organisations and the new. But I don't have it, and I've read of no one who does. And for newspapers, the last great hope now seems to be something called waiting for Rupert. It's hard to see in an English-speaking environment anyway, the companies that have cut a path to a genuine transformation of the future, leveraging off the back of great brands, big audiences and bigger profits so they might secure a place in the new world. It's certainly hard to see any that did so without diversifying aggressively out of the core business, which made them their money and their name, to find new streams of income, different stories for advertisers and a growth story for investors. And now, new vast herds seem to be on the move. Mathematicians founding Google, a student inventing Facebook, and last generation's new money, the Microsoft and the Yahoos, determined to spend all they can to stay in the game. And you never know where the next challenge is going to come from. Silently and very fast, the next Twitter, the next Facebook is being invented to attract and entrance audiences, to steal time, to steal advertising dollars, to steal more of the growth, to steal the future from traditional media. Everywhere now the scramble is on to win in online, to give the audiences what they want when they want it. But it is hard in traditional media when there is still so much left to lose. When you've spent so much to getting where you are, and you have those presses and those trucks, the cost of your television licence, your broadcasting systems. When newspaper advertising still brings in 10 times what the advertising online does. When audiences watching your catch-up services are far less valuable than those watching television when you broadcast there. When you have been so powerful and dominant for so long, it is hard to believe that empire is slipping away. You want to believe that you'll see the green shoots of recovery, that the good times will come back once the advertisers start spending again. These surviving media giants, successful and profitable for decades, are used to shaping their audiences and shaping their worlds. The habit of command is hard to break. And any deference to audience power seems acquired only when all the other possibilities have been exhausted. And the latest example is the push by the newspaper proprietors, led by Murdoch, to get people to pay for their content online. After nearly 15 years, when the vast majority of online news and information has been free. When Rupert Murdoch bought the Wall Street Journal, he indicated he would look to drop the paper's paid website. But now, in the saddle, he looks to transplant that paid content model to all his newspapers, and he's keen for all other newspapers to fall into line. And as his son James said recently in the UK, those pesky public broadcasters who should seek to provide quality content to the public for free, who want to do that, they should be pulled into line. The Murdoch Push is fascinating. You sense this rage at the injustice of what the online world is doing to his traditional print business model. Murdoch has always been willing to cross-subsidise his print passions. Papers like the Times of London, the New York Post and the Australian endured years of losses and survived because he said so, and because he had the Simpsons there to help soak up the red ink. And ironically, given his current plans, one of his strategies was always to cut the price of content to cheap and often uneconomic levels to put his competitors under the gun. But now the man who just 4 years ago said that he wanted to make the necessary cultural changes to meet the new demands of the digital native says he's not going to respond to the demands of those digital natives. Instead, they who have never paid in their lives for news online will be asked to respond instead to his demands and start paying. The argument seems to be that people once didn't pay to watch television, but many now do. We fought against time local phone calls, and now we make them every day on our mobile phones. Some of us now might, through iTunes, pay for recorded music that we once downloaded illegally. And he believes that because we want to read and see this great content through his newspapers so badly online, now we will pay for that. It strikes me as a classic play of old empire, of empire in decline, believing that because you once controlled the world, you can continue to do so. Because you once set the rules, you can do so again, acting on the assumption that you still have the power that befits the emperor. And whilst it is always dangerous to underestimate Murdoch, the assumptions that underpin the Murdoch plan seem to me wistful and perhaps wishful. Some mastheads, like the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times, will have pricing power. They have distinctive content. That content, appropriately used, is more than entertaining and informative. It can be financially valuable. And beyond that, there will be other brands, the New York Times, The Economist, the Washington Post, who provide reporting so distinctive, so comprehensive, so authoritative, that they may also have pricing power online. But what about the rest? What do they have to offer online? Major events have never been reported more widely. From news reports to commentary, analysis, chat rooms, photo and video has become ubiquitous. When a newspaper breaks a story, it becomes news and everybody reports it. Unless everyone, everywhere, decides to charge, there will be so much content that's available free. The pricing power comes from being an exclusive provider of services people feel they badly want. The convenience and utility of the mobile phone allowed providers to set a price for these services. And whilst there are differences in prices and offerings, no one is offering mobile services for free. Exclusive content on pay TV has been the main driver of audience take-up there. And despite the massive piracy levels for recorded music, iTunes has demonstrated again the public is willing to pay for a service that appears to be relatively cheap, of high quality and of enduring value. A song on iTunes costs little and lasts forever and is built on the back of micropayments for artist royalties. But when you want to charge customers for something that in this era is effectively generic, that has many different free substitutes and is by its nature ephemeral, mainly used and discarded, then the challenges you face are formidable. And antitrust laws lie in wait for a deal to be struck between newspaper organisations around a collective approach to this. In any event, game theory would suggest the incentive for other newspapers will be, finally, not to charge. To lock up content will be to dry up traffic. To be a substitute that offers that content for free will drive traffic up and assist in the pricing power in setting advertising rates. You can almost hear the other proprietors urging Murdoch on, assuring him that they are right behind him. And they are pushing him through that paywall as they then scurry away to make as much as they can for as long as they can outside the paywall. To be free to pick up the traffic that flees the sites that now want payment for access. There will be sites that have free and premium content, as there are today. But I suspect too much attention is being given to finding a pay model rather than addressing the content questions in terms of quality and distinctiveness that will really drive audience commitment in the long term. There will be newspapers that largely get out of online altogether, who try and hold their print franchise for as long as they can, and it might work for a regional paper for a time, but it denies the reality for those who can make the investment in content without the overheads of printing and distribution. Much of the content, most of it, nearly all of it, when you look at the totality of the web, will continue to be free. It certainly will be free at the ABC. We won't run the most comprehensive news operation in the country, with more reporters locally, nationally and internationally than anyone else. We report the news, break news and provide space for analysis and commentary. The public pays for the ABC to deliver distinctive content to them. And if it is content we are creating and packaging for them now, they are entitled to view that content free of charge. We are restructuring our entire operations around our ability to deliver on that commitment, redesigning the way our newsrooms operate, creating new services like continuous news online and our internet television service iView. And as our content is paid for by the public, and as the public currently pays for the distribution of our content through terrestrial broadcasts, we will be fighting for that content to be continued to be accessed free, including through the National Broadband Network. Today at the ABC we face plenty of challenges. And in a way, we are a media giant of our own and face very real demands in this new environment. Like how a public broadcaster created in an era of media scarcity survives in an era of media plenty. How to be heard amidst all the clutter. And we also face the challenge of standing up to critics who, in the face of their own competitive pressure, will turn against the public broadcaster, attacking our content, attacking our funding, attacking our right to exist. The Murdoch speech in the UK attacking the BBC in recent weeks sets up the arguments we can expect to emerge here, rolled out by the usual suspects.